Hello, Sequoia fifth graders. This is Mr. Wolf, and we are going to be working on reading story word problems and then using what we read to come up with a situation equation and then solve the problem. This is lining up with Unit 6, Lessons 1 and 2. So if you are going to be following along and working on this in your workbook, you should go to pages 207, 208, 209, and 210. So I'm going to start off with our first word problem. And here it is. Marisa walks every day for exercise. After walking 3 miles, she stops to rest. Altogether, she walks 5 miles. How many miles does she walk after resting? Now, anytime we have a word problem, particularly one that is a simple 3-step equation, we want to think about what we start with, what we end with, and what changes. So in this story, I'm going to read it one more time. Marisa walks every day for exercise. After walking 3 miles, she stops to rest. Altogether, she walks 5 miles. How many miles does she walk after resting? In this case, we start with 3 miles. Something changes, and we end with 5. So we're figuring out, in this case, what the change is. And we can say if it's something she does more after resting, we're going to be adding. And I'm going to use a variable here. That is whenever we put in a letter to replace a mystery. So we aren't sure how much she walked after resting, so I'm putting in the letter N. This is called a situation equation. We've taken the story and rewritten it as an equation. Now, I'm going to bring us back to math from a while ago and show us our math mountains. And if we remember our math mountains, it has the sum at the top and the addends at the bottom. And what that tells us is 3 plus n equals 5. This is useful to remember because it works with addition, but it also works with subtraction. So to solve this, I want my n to stand alone. And so I'm going to say 5 minus 3 equals n. The math mountains work in both directions. 5 minus 3 equals n. And this I know. I know 5 minus 3 is 2. And I have my answer now. She walked 2 miles. These math mountains are going to be helpful if you need to remember how the addition and subtraction are going to be working. And this was a question below a 5th grade level, but it works when we use new 5th grade math as well. For instance, our second question, a length of ribbon is 1 5/10 meters long. What length should be cut off so the ribbon is only 0 65/100 of a meter long? So once again, I'm going to want to write a situation equation. And to do that, I'm thinking, what do I start with? What changes? And what do I end with? A length of ribbon is 1 5/10 meters long. I'm starting with 1 5/10. What length should be cut off so the ribbon is only 0 65/100 of a meter long? Well, I'm cutting something off. So that means I'm subtracting, and it's a mystery. I don't know what it is, and I'm going to just keep using the letter n as my variable. And it ends up being 0 65/100. So let's make our math mountain again. And we know addends go at the bottom and the sum goes at the top. But this is a subtraction problem. When it's a subtraction problem, the first number is our largest number. And therefore, it's the one that goes at the top. 1 5/10 at the top. 0 and 65 hundredths n. And the reason that this is helpful is, once again, we want the n to be on its own so we can figure out what it is. And so we know that we can say the top number minus the bottom number equals the other bottom number. It works in both directions, though. So we can say 1 5/10 minus 0 and 65 hundredths equals n. And this is something we now know how to solve. And what I always talk to my class about is, if we're subtracting or adding with decimals, I like to line up my decimals before I even start the equation. So I line up my decimal points because I know it's going to be a decimal minus a decimal equals a decimal. And now I can put these in. The 1 is on one side of the decimal point, the 5 is on the other, because that's my wholes and my tenths. And then 0 wholes, 6 tenths, 5 hundredths. And this is interesting because I am going to be taking out a hundredth, so I don't have any hundredths in my first number. I can just put a 0. I don't have any, and 0 mean the same thing. 0 minus 5 I can't do, so I'm going to regroup. I'm going to take my 5 tenths and say that's the same as 4 tenths plus 10 hundredths. 10 minus 5 is 5, and I move on. 4 minus 6 I can't do, so I'm going to take my whole and say that's the same as 0 wholes plus 10 tenths. 14 minus 6 is 8. 0 minus 0 is 0, and now I have my answer. 85 hundredths of a meter. We're going to do 2 more examples, and they're going to get a little more tricky each time, and that's good. It gives us more practice. So our next example hopefully will make you a little bit hungry. We've got a pastry chef uses a 1/2 pound block of cream cheese to make frosting for 4 cakes. If they use the same amount of frosting on each cake, how much cream cheese is used per cake? Once again, we want to make our situation equation. And so we are going to look at what we start with, what changes, and what we end with. We start with a 1/2 pound block of cream cheese. That is a lot of cream cheese. We are then splitting it between 4 cakes. If we are splitting something equally, that is division. I'm going to divide it by 4. And it equals, I don't know yet. And I'm going to put in my variable n. Now there are 2 ways we've learned to divide a fraction by a whole number. The first, so I'm going to divide this in half to show the 2 different ways on both sides. One was through drawing. So I can draw myself 1/2. So let me shade in 1/2. All right, and I want to now divide that half, split it into 4 equal pieces. And I'm going to now look at what is 1 piece. So this 1 piece, well, it is 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that is 1/8 pounds of cream cheese. The other way we could do it is remembering that if you're splitting something into 4 pieces, you're dividing it by 4, or you are multiplying it by 1/4. So we could start with 1/2 divided by 4 equals n, but shift it to 1/2 times 1/4 equals n. Now, when we're multiplying with fractions, that becomes really easy. We just multiply across. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 4 is 8. 1/8 pounds of cream cheese. Either way you solve it is correct. We got one more we're going to use. And this is going to be the trickiest because it uses the most recent 5th grade math. A floor shaped like a rectangle has a width of 9 5/10 feet and an area of 114 square feet. What is the length of the floor? Well, there's a few things we need to remember. One is how we find area. Now, we could draw ourselves the rectangle and say our area, the space inside, is 114. Our width is 9 5/10. Our length, we do not know. And today I'm going to use n every single time I have a variable. We could also just remember that we have learned area equals length times width. And so I can fill in my blanks. Area, I know what my area is. It's 114. Equals length, I do not know my length, n, times width, 9 5/10. So here, let me move that multiplication a little higher up so it does not look like a decimal point. We know the same way that multiplication or the same way that addition and subtraction are connected, multiplication and division are connected. So if we know 9 5/10 times n equals 114, then we know 114 divided by 9 5/10 equals n. Now this is where we get to some of that advanced 5th grade math. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of workspace. I'm going to write in my division problem. 114, 9 5/10. I'm also going to write in my steps for long division. I always use the mnemonic device. Charlie, do, monkeys, sell, chopped bananas. Check, divide, multiply, subtract, check, bring down. And there's a lot of things we need to do right here. I'm noticing I have a decimal in my divisor, and we hate decimal divisors. And so we're going to want to change it. I want to move my decimal point one time to get it over here. That way, 95 is not a decimal divisor, and I'm fine with it. But if I move a decimal point once in my divisor, I need to move a decimal point once in my dividend. And so I know my decimal point started here. I'm going to move it over here. And so now I have a little blank space. I can't have a blank space, so I'm going to put in a 0. And I'm going to make sure to remember to put my decimal point up as well. So we did the first problem, the first difficult part about getting rid of our decimal divisor. But now we have a 2-digit divisor. And so what I always recommend to students when working with a 2-digit divisor is for the first check and divide, we round. So I'm going to round my 95 up to 100. I'm going to check. Does the 100 fit into 1? It does not. I'm going to check again. Does 100 fit into 11? It does not. Does 100 fit into 114? It does. Now, how many times? It would only fit in one time. So check, divide, multiply. 1 times 95 is 95. Multiply, subtract. 4 minus 5 I cannot do. So I'm going to take that 10 and replace it make it 10 ones instead. I have now 14 minus 5 is 9. I can't do 0 minus 9, but I can do 10 minus 9, which is 1. And I am going to now check. Can 95 fit into 19? No, it cannot. So I'm going to bring down my 0. Now I'm going to go back to the start, my check, and I'm going to once again use the rounded number. Can 100 fit into 190? And it can. How many times? Well, it'll go 100, 200, that's already too big. So I'm going to say it fits in once. Some of you might be getting a little worried when I write that, but there's a reason we have our second check. So we're going to now multiply. 1 times 95 is 95. We subtract. Can't do 0 minus 5, so I'm going to change my 9 tens into 8 tens, and my 0 ones into 10 ones. 10 minus 5 is 5. 18 minus 9 is 9. And now we move to our last check. Can 95 fit into 95? Oh, yes, it can. How many times? It can fit in 1 time. So in the same column as that 5, I'm going to remember I need to add in 1 more. 1 times 95 would be 95. 95 minus 95, it's going off the screen, but it is a 0. So now I can say, so we had changed it to be 114 divided by 9 5/10 was n. And now we say 11 plus 1, that is 12 equals n. So that length is 12 feet. Hope this made sense. We are going to give you some assignments to do where you have to come up with your situation equation and then solve. Once again, you can go to pages 207, 208, 209, and 210 in your workbook to continue practicing these skills. Thank you so much and have a great day.